Welcome to Saturday in the SEC. I'm your host, Jacob Hopkins. Let's get right into it. Roll the intro.
Big night, bright lights, dogfight, bragging rights, underdogs, comebacks, armchair quarterbacks. Make the snap, make the play, make the catch, make him pay. Dedication, legacies, rivalries, dynasties. Rammer, jammer, roll tide, hook 'em horns, Texas fight, anchor down, go. Vandy, thumbs up, gig and Maggie's, Auburn Tigers, War Eagle, hotty toddy with the Rebels, Boomer Sooner, call the Hogs, between the hedges, go Dogs, Wildcats, Big Blue, Tigers prowling, Wazoo, Hail State, Bulldogs, Rocky Top, go Vols, Gators shop in the swamp, Carolina, go Cox, Death Valley, LSU, Tigers loose in Baton Rouge. Right here, right now is the place to be. Get your game face on. It's Saturday in the SEC.
Welcome in, welcome all. Welcome to the inaugural Saturday in the SEC show. Again, my name is Jacob Hopkins. I am your host for today. And before we get started, I just wanted to talk about the fact that this used to be Florida Man Sports. That is no more. Because look at this. I'm wearing Georgia stuff, and it just doesn't make sense for me to be saying Florida Man Sports this, Florida Man Sports that, Florida Man this, Florida Man that, and to continue to wear Georgia stuff. So I figured let's talk about my true passion, college football, the SEC, where it just means more. With that being said, week 1 is already upon us. We got a game coming out tonight with Mizzou. They're playing, who even cares? It's probably some cupcake. We got a great game with Texas later on. We got a big game for LSU. And with not much going on in the conference schedule, I figured let's go ahead and just do some predictions, some overviews, talk about what's happened in this offseason. So let's go ahead and get straight into the first team, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Like I said, the first team we'll be going over is the Alabama Crimson Tide. And that's not really because I like them, let's be honest. It's just because the alphabet, alphabetical order, yada, yada, yada. So let's go ahead and cover Paul Feinbaum's sweetheart, the Crimson Tide. With Jalen Milroe gone, Ty Simpson will now be taken over for the Crimson Tide. He's coming into his 4th year with the team, but in his one start, he was benched. And that was against USF of all teams. But of course, the Tides still have preseason all-SEC wide receiver Ryan Williams. And of course, he's the cover athlete. He's supposed to be this big, hyped-up guy. But last season, he only put up 10 total touchdowns. That's not a lot. That's why I consider him to be one of the most overhyped players in college football and, of course, the SEC. The only reason that I feel like people even think he's relevant is because he was 17 years old last year. If people didn't have a Wander Franco mindset, if you will, he'd just be a regular old receiver. Bama's first game this season is in Tallahassee against last year's laughingstock, the Florida State Seminoles. The spread currently has Alabama as 13.5-point favorites, so if I was a betting man, I would just take the FSU spread. I don't see Alabama's offense being nearly up to par with what they were last year, and of course they have to deal with the Noles' above-average defense. With Bama having a weaker schedule, I see them going 8-4 and Kalen DeBoer, their head coach, being on the hot seat. They're going to drop their game to Georgia. They're going to drop their game to Tennessee. They're going to drop a game to LSU. And they're going to drop a game to South Carolina. South Carolina's coming back with vengeance. Next up on our list is the Arkansas Razorbacks. They're coming into this season with a gauntlet ahead of them. Half their games are against preseason top 25 teams, and 4 of those are on the road. The only bright spot they have is their senior quarterback, Taylon Green. And let's be honest, he's ass. If he wasn't 6'6", 225 and fast, he'd be putting the fries in the bag at McDonald's. Last season, he threw for 15 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. No bueno. He also barely eclipsed 3,000 passing yards. The Hogs at least get to start out the year with an easy win against Alabama A&M, so not much more to say there. The Razorbacks will likely find themselves just fighting for bowl eligibility because at the end of the year, they have to deal with Tennessee, A&M, LSU, Texas, Ole Miss, and they even have to deal with Notre Dame at the beginning of the year. I wouldn't even be shocked if they lost to Memphis. Memphis, the team that couldn't even get into the Big 12. Best case scenario, the Hogs are going 5-7. The Auburn Tigers have one thing going for them, and that's just many coaches in the SEC believe that their home stadium Jordan Hare is haunted. I mean, just think about everything that's happened there. The kick six, there's the prayer of Jordan Hare, there's that 8-6-7 overtime game at Texas against Texas A&M where they really shouldn't have won, but Kerr Stadium. Sure, they have a preseason all-SEC receiver in Cam Coleman, but who's going to throw him the ball? This offseason, the Tigers went out and got former Oklahoma quarterback Jackson Arnold via the transfer portal. For context, he was benched the second Oklahoma played a real team because he sucked so damn hard. But for some reason, Auburn is favored in their Week 1 matchup against Baylor out in Waco, Texas. I'm telling you, do not ever bet on Auburn unless they're the home team. But given the curse of Jordan Hare, maybe Aubie finds a few home wins here and there, but likely not. They're going 6-6 this year in regular Auburn fashion. Last year, the Florida Gators faced a gauntlet of a schedule. The same can be said this year, but this time they have a quarterback who's actually competent. DJ Lagway played 5 full games last year. He won 5 games last year. 2 of those were against top 25 teams, might I add. In those last 5 games, Lagway looked really good, while the run game finally stepped up. But more importantly, the defense stepped up big time. In those last 5 games, they allowed an average of 13 points per game. Florida plays Long Island for their first game, so there's really no need to talk about that. So yes, the Gators do have 7 top 25 teams on their schedule, 4 of which are in the top 10. Sure, they'll win some, but not all of them. I have the Gators going 9-3 with losses to LSU, Texas, and Georgia, but that could still easily slip them in the playoffs as an 11 seed. During the 2024 season, the Georgia Bulldogs won the SEC title and made the playoffs. They did all that despite leading the country in dropped passes. With 2 of the biggest culprits, Dominic Lovett and Arian Smith, gone somehow to the NFL, the Dogs went out and got the speedster Zachariah Branch out of USC, and they got a 6'6" behemoth receiver Noah Thomas out of Texas A&M. With the departure of quarterback Carson Beck, former 4-star Gunnar Stockton will take over the offense. He's basically a slightly bigger version of Stetson Bennett, might I add. Yes, I know he lost his only start last year, but you can't blame him when there were 4 separate times when receivers dropped the ball that hit them in the face or in their hands, and I could go on a rant, but I'm just going to not do that because we'll be here till midnight. But of course, the UGA will have a great defense that consists of 4 preseason All-SEC defenders. The Dogs open up the season between the hedges against Marshall, which will be nothing short of a plane wreck for the Thundering Herd. Too soon? I see the Dogs going 11-1 with a loss to Tennessee on the road with reasons that I'll explain later. They'll likely win the conference, and they will make the playoffs. The Kentucky Wildcats should really just look forward to basketball season. Their best player from last year transferred to a conference rival. They don't have any preseason All-SEC players. There is nothing to be hopeful besides another sport. But worst of all, their man who's dragging them down, Mark Stoops, is under contract until 2031. The end is nowhere near. Big Blue will suck this year. They're going 0-8 in conference play, and they could very well find themselves losing to a surprisingly feisty Toledo team in Week 1. The LSU Tigers are poised for a great year. They kept future first-round quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, and they brought in 2 transfer portal receivers. Last year, he threw for over 4,000 yards in what was considered to be a down year. Imagine what a more experienced quarterback could do with an upgraded receiving core. The Bayou Bengals also paid more attention to their weaker side of the ball this offseason. They went out and got the one bright spot from FSU in edge rusher Patrick Payton. The Tigers' Week 1 matchup is a fellow Tiger, the Clemson Tigers. That game will be in the northernmost Death Valley, which is also in Clemson. I have last year's ACC champs not only winning that game, but winning the national championship on the back of Cade Klubnik. I see LSU losing to only one other team this year, and that would be to Ole Miss in Oxford. That puts them at 10-2 for the year and 7-1 of the conference. They'll make the SEC championship via a tiebreaker over 2 teams and most likely slip into the playoffs. I'm going to keep this one quick. Mississippi State is going 0-8 in conference play just like they did last year. They suck. They're worse than Kentucky. To make matters worse, they lost their only bright spot from last year, starting quarterback Michael Van Buren Jr. This season will be nothing short of misery for the Missouri Tigers. Their star quarterback Brady Cook and their wide receiver Luther Burden III both left for the NFL. They did, however, pick up the number 1 D lineman in the transfer portal from UGA in Damon Wilson II. They also got a backup quarterback from Penn State in Beau Pribula. Mizzou hasn't even decided if he's their backup quarterback yet, so this team is in shambles. I'm not going to bother to talk about who they're playing because, again, I don't think it's a real school. It might be a middle school for all I know. But to sum it up, this team is mid at best. I have them going 5-7 while only beating Mississippi State in conference play. The Oklahoma Sooners come into the season with one of the hardest schedules in college football. 7 top 25 teams, and 3 of those are in the top 10. Their offense struggled mightily last year due to the hole they had at quarterback. They did fix that problem with their transfer quarterback, John Mateer, who led the Washington State Cougars to a surprisingly good 8-5 season. He also had 47 touchdowns, and that's, by the way, through the air and on the ground, so, total touchdowns. They also snagged senior running back Jaden Ott from Cal, who led the Pac-12 in rushing yards when it still existed. RIP. OU should blow out their Week 1 opponent in Illinois State, so again, no need to focus too much on that matchup. But it's a shame that Sooner Nation has such a rough schedule because they really could be fun to watch. But with Michigan, Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Bama, Tennessee, LSU, all of them on their schedule, best I can see is 7-5 with all 5 losses coming to the SEC. The Ole Miss Rebels are coming off barely missing the playoffs last year. To make things worse, they lost their best player on offense in quarterback Jackson Dart, and they lost their best player on defense and defensive tackle Walter Nolan. However, they do have a somewhat decent situation at quarterback with Austin Simmons, who's now a sophomore. In his one meaningful drive last year, he led the Rebels to a touchdown through the air in their win against Georgia. They had no notable transfer portal acquisitions, so maybe Lane Kiffin can find another player at a frat party, because he already did it. Ole Miss opens the season with a free win against Georgia State, so that's got to be something, right? The Rebels' saving grace is a relatively easy schedule for the SEC, but they still have 5 ranked teams to deal with. Best case scenario, though, is like 8-4 probably. These South Carolina Gamecocks are scary. After narrowly missing the playoffs like Ole Miss, Cock Nation only got harder. They've stiffened up an already rock-solid defense with 3 4-star transfers. By a stroke of luck, they landed the second best running back in the portal, and they've already handed him the job of starting back. The Cocks also have freshman All-American Dylan Stewart there to lay wood. But cock jokes aside, the most important piece for USC is the sophomore quarterback Lenoris Sellers. He was decent last year, but if he performs like the Heisman contender he's supposed to be, South Carolina could find themselves deep in a playoff run. I have the Gamecocks dropping only 1 game this season to LSU at Death Valley in a pivotal matchup that will end up being a tiebreaker later in the season. The Tennessee Volunteers have the best defense in college football. They are returning 7 of their starters from a unit that placed 7th in points allowed per game last year. That includes future first-round picks, James Pierce Jr. at edge rusher, and all preseason SEC defensive back Jeremy McCoy. They do start off the season with Syracuse at home this Saturday, but Rocky Top rarely loses at home. The only games I see them dropping are both on the road to teams they've historically struggled against, Florida and Alabama. So 10-2 overall, 6-2 in the conference, and almost definitely a trip back to the playoffs. The Texas A&M Aggies lost most of their starters from last year to the portal and the draft. All they really did was bring in 2 receivers from the portal for rising star quarterback Marcel Reed. But that doesn't solve the problem of the entire defense leaving. Per usual, they'll be playing a cupcake in UTSA in week 1, so they should be fine there. But the Aggies actually lucked into an easier conference schedule with only 4 ranked teams. They do, however, travel to play Notre Dame, but per usual, A&M's going 7-5. The Texas Longhorns are coming off of a deep playoff push that ended to the now national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. The Longhorns had the second, and that's number 2, second ranked defense in the country last year, so naturally, many of their starters went to the NFL. They were, however, able to reload with 3 4-star D lineman transfers to go along with 2 preseason All SEC defenders. But as I'm sure most of you know, that's not the biggest story for Texas this year. They've got a Manning. Sophomore quarterback Arch Manning will be taking over for the Longhorns with a loaded team around him. But let's think about who he played against for a second. He has 2 career starts, one against Louisiana Monroe and the other against an awful Mississippi State team. His other reps were in garbage time. Even in high school, it looked like he was just playing bums. He has all the time in the world in the pocket, and he's throwing to wide open receivers. So it's because of his inexperience against real competition that I have the Buckeyes taking this Week 1 matchup in the Horseshoe. I do see them having a solid season. They're going to finish 10-2. They have an easier SEC schedule, so there's not too much ahead of them, but they will lose that game to Georgia between the hedges. There will be no Vanderbilt slander on this channel. They were the darling of the SEC last year, and they were actually decent for a change. They even picked up their first bowl win since the 2013 season. Last year's starting quarterback, Diego Pavia, was granted 1 more year of eligibility, so at least they've got that going for them. They'll kick off the season with an SEC-style cupcake versus Charleston Southern. But unfortunately, they do have 5 ranked opponents on their schedule for the year, and 3 of them are in the top 10. I see them going 7-5, which is still not bad for Vandy standards. Well, that's all for Week 1, y'all. If you like what you saw, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified whenever I post. And if you want more content, you can also find me on X. You can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me just about anywhere, all with the same handle, Saturday in the SEC. I am so happy we're back, and just remember, it just means more.